Hi everyone, Jai Hind and welcome to the platform of StudyIQ IAS in English. My name is Bhavar Singh Surey. I am ex-NDA 115th course and qualified civil services in 2012. And I welcome you on the platform. Now in this session, we'll be talking about the Juang Tribe of Odisha. And they were in the news because of not, a good thing, but because of a sad news. That is that there were a fire. And ultimately, because of that fire that was there in a seasonal food processing unit that is located in Tiruvallur in Tamil Nadu, that killed 15 of the migrant workers. And the sad part is that out of these 15 which were killed, the 14 were the teenage girls which were from the Juang community. And ultimately, Juang, when it comes to the community, it is a PVTG that is basically native to the Kyoncha that is there in Odisha. Now, the victims, they were part of the larger group of 24 workers which were recruited from the Jhumka block of the Kyoncha to work far from the home, and it has been drawn by the promise of a steady wage that their own villages they could not offer. Now, their bodies have traveled nearly about 1500 kilometers back home to their villages. That is a journey that has forced a hard question. That is why nearly 5 decades after the targeted welfare programs began, the Juang girls, they are still forced to migrate into the unregulated hazardous work even today. And this is a very important and pertinent question that is there in front of us. So it is quite important that what we know still far is that there are the 24 of the migrant workers which are at the unit. Out of this, we have 15 workers which have died, out of which 14 were the teenage Juang girls. And you can just imagine that they were promised just a meager 5,000 of the rupees monthly wage per worker. And you can then understand the major problem that we are talking about right now related to the vulnerable sections of the society that is there. Now, it is quite important that this is the complete sequence of the event that has unfolded. So there was the labor agent. Ultimately, they recruited the teenage girls from the Juang hamlets that is there in Kyoncha, offering them a fixed monthly wage unavailable locally. The girls, they traveled out of the state often, that is without the registration that is under the law, which is meant to protect the interstate migrant workers. And then what happens is that a fire, it breaks out at the processing unit where the workers, they had little means of the escape. Ultimately, 15 deaths have been confirmed, out of which we have 12 of the teenage girls which are from the Juang community. And Odisha's Labour Department, it has filed a police complaint against the company and the recruiting agents as well. The bodies, they had been transported nearly roughly 1500 kilometers back to Kyoncha for the cremation, and this is a grief that collides with the unanswered questions that are there with respect to the accountability. Now, I'll be talking about this and we'll be just moving ahead and we'll be doing a deep dive in and looking after what are the perspectives that are there. But before that, let me tell you that today you have the offer of 50% off that is on all the courses of the UPSC on the platform of StudyIQ. You can enroll into them by using the code BRSLIVE. And when it comes to the Juang community, so over here it is quite important that they are concentrated in the Kyoncha district in Odisha and notably around Gonasikha, that is the traditional heartland of the community. Now, historically, when it comes to Juang community, they had been dependent upon the shifting cultivation and forest produce, land and livelihood assets, thereby they remain quite limited today. Now, when it comes to the Juang, they are classified as PVTG or particularly vulnerable tribal group on the account of the pre-agriculture trades, the low and stagnant literacy and a fragile subsistence economy as well. Now, when it comes to the complete plan, so there was Juang Development Agency or JDA that was set up at Gonasikha in 1978. Now, this is one of the Odisha's oldest tribal micro-project agencies so that it could secure the livelihood, the education and the health accesses as well. And since 1978, you can see that this had been notably 5 decades where we have the migration that is going out of the district. And this is not the promised local development that was promised in 1978 that we are seeing. And it has become the community's most practical option for the income. And that is why these communities, they are migrating out in the search of the employment and for sustaining their livelihood as well. Now, when it comes to this particular group, this is basically in the PVTG category because of the pre-agriculture level of technology where the major reliance was on the hunter-gathering and even on the shifting cultivation rather than the settled or the technology-aided farming. Also, there is the another criteria that is about stagnant or the declining population, where the demographic indicators, they show little or no natural growth over the period of time. There is extremely low literacy and even the subsistence level of the economy that is there, and that is the criteria that actually is used for determining if a tribe is basically a particularly vulnerable tribe or not. Now, when it comes to the complete category, it had evolved over a period of time. In 1960s, there was Debar Commission, which have flagged that there is the acute intra-tribal disparity, and some of the tribal groups, they are lagging far behind the others. That was flagged by Debar Commission. Later on in 1975-78, the center have identified the first batch of the PVTGs, or particularly or primitive tribal groups, or PTGs that they were called, and they were nationally for the focus support. So in 1993, the list was expanded and there was the count of the identified tribes that have reached up to 75. And later on in 2006, the group was renamed from PTGs, that is primitive tribal group, to particularly vulnerable tribal groups. That is where we have only the terminology that have changed. The vulnerability, it still persists today as well. Now, when it comes to the Odisha as a state, so you can see that there are total, or it is home to 13 of the 75 of the PVTGs which had been identified nationally, and it is the highest count of any state that you will find. Over here, when it comes to the combined PVTG population, it is roughly nearly about 19 lakh that is served through the about 20 tribal micro project agencies, including the JDA or the Juang Development Agency that we have just spoken about. So there are total 17 of them which are there in Odisha, which is nearly about 19 lakh of the population that we are talking about. Now, when it comes to the complete 5 decades of the scheme, you will see that there were the various schemes that were promised. Like, for example, in 1978, it was JDA or Juang Development Agency, which was a micro project agency set up at Gonasika to deliver the livelihood, education and the health support to the Juang. Now, right now we have the PVTG development scheme, where it is central umbrella scheme which funds Odisha's nearly about 20 of the micro project agencies through the annual grants. There is also the PM-JANMAN mission that was launched between 2023 and 26, which is centrally sponsored mission for the holistic PVTG development with the national outlay in the tens of thousands of crore. And when it comes to Odisha, there is 13 of the PVTG, they are the major beneficiary. Then comes the proposed Dajgua, that is Dharti Aba Janjatiya Gram Utkarsh Abhiyan, basically a restructured larger outlay scheme proposed by the Odisha's Scheduled Caste and the Scheduled Tribe Development Department. It is still waiting for the central's approval. So this is the pattern where we have the agency and the schemes, they have multiplied on the paper. But at the same time, as the families in the Kancha, they attest there is work at the home that remains scarce, and that is pushing their daughters towards the high risk of the regions instead of the relief that they have gotten out of the various schemes and the projects which had been launched by the government. Now, when it comes to the complete perspective, so there is the various, things that have led to the restructuring, or you can say the constraining of the budget that is not reaching to these people. Now, over here, it is quite important that when it comes to the welfare architecture, so it is not actually reaching the Juang homes because of the local wages which are low and irregular. Now, when it comes to a fixed out of the stay wage, even at the modest levels, like for example, we have spoken about like 5,000 per month, it outcompetes anything that is available at the home, and that is why these people, they are migrating to the different states. There is also malnutrition that persists, and the literacy that also remains below the general scheduled tribe levels. So there is the decades after the PVTG status was meant to trigger the focus intervention which had not been done yet. Also, the micro project agencies, they report unspent grant balances and the incomplete works, even as the families report that there had been no visible change on the ground. So actually the fund, it is not being spent, but only it is being demarcated for the actions. Then the Interstate Migrant Workmen Act that was passed in 1979. This is quite important because it was meant to mandate the registration and the protection of the workers like these, and ultimately this remains largely unenforced. And then the recruitment of this kind of the hazardous and the unregulated work disproportionately targets the young women and the girls because they can work faster and they have more of the energy, and with the few safeguards, once again, when they leave home, that actually leads to such kind of crisis that we have seen recently. Now, this is not just about Juang. It is not the isolated case, because there are the other cases as well when it comes to the different PVTG, and it is again, I'm talking about the Bonda tribe of the Malkangiri. Now, in the Malkangiris, we have the Bonda, the villages. We have the boys that actually leave home once they cross their mid-teens or they finish their schooling, heading out in the search of the quick income. So this is the same pattern that you can see in the another district as well, in Malkangiri as well. Over here, the girls often marry early or take up the local field labor. Some Bonda girls, they have also married outside the community after migrating, weakening the ties to their villages of origin. Also, the observers, they link the exodus to the unresolved land rights and the absence of the visible change from the tribal development agencies, echoing that Juang experience almost exactly in the Bonda tribe as well. So this is quite important, because a migration expert have quoted in the reporting notes that the seasonal migration itself is not new to the tribal India. What should worry the policymakers is about the migration into the hazardous and the unregistered work, and even the Interstate Migrant Workmen Act that was passed in 1979. It requires registration of such workers but remains in practice largely unimplemented on the ground as well. Now, this is quite important, because this is from the schemes which are there on the paper to the safety that should be provided onto the ground. Now, what should be the way forward? The way forward should be, the first one is to enforce the migrant registration. We should make the compliance of the act, that is the Interstate Migrant Workmen Act 1979, the compliance should be the precondition for the labor contractors recruiting from the PVTG village. Then the second step that could be taken is to regulate the recruitment agents, where the license and auditing of these agents should be done, who currently operate without near total informality in these tribal hamlets. Now, the another thing that should be done is to converge the local employment schemes. We have the unspent PVTG labor component funds which are there. Now, these should be routed to the guaranteed local works, like for example, with the help of the MGNREGA convergence or the VBG Ramji Act that has now been implemented into India, so that migration is, or it becomes a choice but not a forced compulsion. Then there should be the another thing that should be done is to fast track the land titles, where we have to clear the backlog of the verified but untitled land claims, so families have a durable asset base at the home. And also, there must be the girl specific safety nets that should be provided. You know, when it comes to India, so we always have prayed and we have treated the girls as a DT. So over here, it is quite important that there should be the girl specific safety nets, where we should build the tracking, grievance and the rescue mechanism specifically for the pattern of the young women which is being recruited into the distant and unregulated work. And there must be also the independent scheme audit. Like for example, we can use the CAG style review, not as the annual formality, but to trigger the corrective administrative actions within a proper fixed timeline. So these are the important way forwards that we can have, so that we do not have such kind of instance again in the future. So again, this is quite important, that when it comes to the complete issue, this has broken my heart, and while I was reading this, ultimately I thought that I will share this news with you as well. So that would be all. Thank you very much guys for joining me over here on the platform of the StudyIQ. But let me remind you once again that we have the GS Foundation Batch Resolution P2I, in which you can enroll, and today is the last day of the offer that we are providing you. That is 50% off, and for this you can use the code BRSLive that will fetch you the complete discount. So that would be all in today's session. Thank you very much guys for joining me over here, but do not forget to like the session, to share this session with your friends, and also subscribe to our channel so that you do not miss any of the updates. I will see you in the next video, but till then please take care of yourself. Bye bye and Jai Hind.